So, a state of the states today and over time, and I don't know what this is meant to convey, but whatever it conveys to you, I think is very interesting. So we're going to have 3 sections, and the first section is going to begin with audio clip.
Please understand, Your Excellency, that India has 2 countries, an India of light and an India of darkness. The ocean brings light to my country. Every place on the map of India near the ocean is well off, but the river brings darkness to India.
So firstly, this is a clip from a book by Arvind Adiga, The White Tiger. Okay. Yeah, The White Tiger. You'll have to pretend that it's actually the voice of the author, Arvind Adiga, who did that. Don't ask for more details in terms of whose voice it actually was, but it's Arvind. So I don't know how many people have read this book. I think it's a wonderful book about India, or drawing attention to some of the social dimensions of the Indian development experience. But at one cut, you could say that basically we have 2 Indias. So in the old days, we used to say, there's the Bharat and India, agriculture versus rural. But over time, we got used to this distinction between peninsular India and the India in the middle, comprising BIMARU, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, the Bimaru states, and this distinction between peninsular India and hinterland India actually goes back to a lot of development experience, which says that geography matters a lot for development, and that places that have favorable geography, and one dimension of that favorable geography is being close to the ocean. Therefore, you're more open to trade influences. You intermingle more with other countries. So there's a long tradition going back to that. And of course, whether that's exactly the reason why Gujarat and Tamil Nadu are, have done better than states in the middle, I would leave you to. I think there is something to that. These seafaring parts of India have had more exchanges with people outside. But then I'm sure you could think of times in history when this was not true. After all, at some point in time, Agra and Delhi were more well off than other places. But in any case, recently it's true that peninsular India has done better than, and this is a map which shows that darker is worse, lighter is better, but broadly it is true that peninsular India has done better than in recent years than hinterland India. So then if you wanted to think about India along these dimensions, you could say, has geography mattered for development or not? And you could kind of explore that. Now, so one way I think one could begin to get students interested in India, or firstly just to know their states, to understand what's going on, is to simply go through a number of indicators to see how the different Indian states have been performing. Now, it's post-lunch. I don't want to, at some point, the more data I throw upon you, the more you'll fall asleep. But I think there is some interesting things that we should look at as we go along. Yeah. So the first question is, how rich are the Indian states? So we have, which are the richest states and which are the poorest states in India? And you can see that Goa, Delhi, Sikkim, HR, Haryana, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, Kerala, these are the richer states. You see that, in all these state comparisons, Goa and Delhi are kind of, exceptional states, which one should, whenever one does an analysis, one should probably do the analysis with and without Goa and Delhi and some of the states, because there is something special about them. And you see that, and we've drawn the poverty line as well. And you see, of course, much of India is above the poverty line. India, by definition, in the middle. And of course, you see, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Bihar are pretty much, at the trailing at the back of the pack. And you see also the differences between the richest state, Bihar, and say the poorest big state, say Maharashtra. I think there's a factor of maybe even 4 in terms of how rich they are, or even 5, in fact, between the richest and poorest states. So this is again, now, how one should get students to engage with this data. For example, this is 2014 data, a per capita state domestic product. What do people use for data on state level performance? For example, per capita data. Do you know what sources that you use? This data that we use, I think, comes from EPW, right? CSO. Okay, so it comes from the CSO. But when Danny Roderick and I did our work on the performance of the Indian states and the Hindu growth, the one thing we discovered is that if you want a consistent state level series on GSDP going back in time, it's actually not that easy. And the EPW Research Foundation has a database which goes back to the mid 70s, I think, right? To the mid 70s.
80s, 80s.
Actually, the data that Danny and I used went back to 1960. Yeah, and NSDP goes back to 1960. Yeah.
GSDP from 80.
GSDP from 84, exactly. Whereas NSDP goes back 1960, and this is the data that we used. But actually, before using these data, I would urge you to always look at it a bit carefully. State level data, if GDP at the central level, we discuss some of the issues. I think that I would urge all of you to maybe every student, you should assign him or her to look into the data quality of the states, the per capita quality. I don't know, I've not looked into it myself, but it's something that would be worth. I mean, for example, we know if you add up all the state domestic products, you don't get the national gross domestic product. So that's there are good reasons and there are not so good reasons for that. Both are there. So, but you should do it carefully. Now, how do states compare with China, for example? And here you find that only the 3 richest states are richer than the average level in China. So this is a nice way of kind of just, and this is now in PPP dollars. The previous one was in rupees. This is in PPP dollars. And earlier we had the Indian poverty definition, and now we have the World Bank $90 poverty definition. So it's nice to see that all the states are well above that. But again, you see the ranking is, of course, by definition going to be the same. The small states do well. But not all the small. Say Manipur, for example, is there on the right. Assam is there on the right. Meghalaya is also there on the right. So it's not necessarily true that the small states are better off than the richer states. Then, of course, we care about poverty as well, the head count ratio, and you'll pretty much see that. Of course, in this case, big number is bad, small number is low. And I'm going to show you just a little bit later, it doesn't, income levels and poverty levels are not totally, they're correlated, but they're not perfectly correlated. And you will see that, here, of course, 21.9% is the Tendulkar poverty ratio based on 2011-12. But you can see how, the different states. You see, for example, Goa is it's 5%, and whereas in Chhattisgarh it's almost 40%. So, yeah, question, yeah.
Dr. Rajan's committee recommendations have not been taken by the government.
Yeah, Rajan committee recommendations have not been taken forward by the government. No. Kapil, I'm right? They've not been taken. They just the report is lying. Collecting dust somewhere.
There's another Rangarajan committee's recommendations also on poverty.
Yeah, there's Rangarajan committee. Yeah. See, in all these exercises, what you're trying to do is that you're trying to say that no one dimension captures everything about a state, and you want some multi-dimensional, and you try and basically it's a matter of trying to aggregate different indices, and which leads me to So here's the thing. So we want to see, this is the Human Development Index for the states across India. And as you know, the Human Development Index combines health and education and per capita GDP. And you see that India doesn't do very well internationally on this, in the Indian ranking, 130 out of 188. The Chinese ranking is 90. but you can see again China way above all the Indian states. By the way, we don't have the HDI ranking for all the states. We have it only for the bigger states. And you can see all my Malayali friends here should be proud. Kerala is up there, almost close to China's, and there's a big difference between. And here's, and this is something I don't know whether any of you read the 2 articles of mine that were circulated to you to read. One of the things I learned working on India is that we have, and I think I used this as one of the articles, that we used to think of Kerala as the Scandinavia of India. It turns out, what I discovered, that everyone has known for a long time, but that Himachal Pradesh is the Switzerland of India in terms of all the indicators. This I didn't know. Himachal Pradesh has been growing very rapidly. Its educational enrollment has been so. In fact, if you see, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu are the states which, by the way, already you can see another exception to the hinterland versus peninsular, because the reason why I compared Himachal to Switzerland was 2 reasons. One, there are mountains, but there's another reason why I compared the 2. Can anyone?
They are small, both of them.
Well, landlocked, exactly. So remember that in a geography view of development, being landlocked is a handicap. And you can, a lot of the work that even Jeff Sachs has done, for example, will tell you that landlocked states, because they don't have access to markets, they're very distant from markets, they don't have a lot of trade, they tend to do worse. But Himachal, it turns out, is an exception to that rule. So the wonderful thing about India is that you will have patterns and you will have exceptions, and analyzing these patterns and the exceptions are what make a study of the Indian states very. So this is a very interesting finding that, So here's the other interesting thing, right? When you look at this, my Malayali friends will be very pleased. But then there'll be some Malayali Marxists who will say, Marxism Zindabad. And then you say, well, but how's West Bengal doing? And, not so good. So my Bengali friends, I don't know how many of them are here. My Bengali friends will say, it can't be about ideology, because West Bengal is not doing so well. Remember that West Bengal, so there's something similar, right, to Kerala, West Bengal, and Jammu and Kashmir. I'll come to that. I'll come to that in a second. But I think there are lots of interesting patterns here. So infant mortality, again, what stands out, of course, Madhya Pradesh, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, really shockingly high infant mortality rates even now. And you see Kerala, on the other hand, spectacularly off the charts in a positive way. So really, Kerala, as being the Scandinavia of India, stands out on these health outcomes compared to the other states as well. Now, this is data. So when we look at education, so here's an interesting and important distinction to draw. When we look at educational outcomes in India, for example, you could look at enrollment data, and you will see a huge improvement in enrollment data. But here I'm showing you data from the ASAR. Pratham does these annual survey of education reports, ASAR and ASER, and here you see the outcomes. For example, you see that reading outcomes are at primary level. So high number means bad, because it says percentage children enrolled in standard 5 who can read. Okay, I thought it said cannot read. Who can read? It goes, and remember, it's a very low bar here. It's not a high bar, so be careful here. It's in standard 5 who can read, standard 2 level text, and there who can do, division in standard 5. But even here, what you find is that this is not very great. A lot of variation across the states. But the average level in India, only 50% on reading and 25% on basic arithmetic. This is what is pretty shocking about India, yeah.
So this report is particularly for rural India only. It's government school, not all schools of India.
No, no, it's urban. You're right. They only do rural, but I'm not sure they do only government. I thought they did. Okay, you're right. They probably only do government school. Yeah, I knew they didn't do urban at all, but only government schools. Yeah, but but remember that I have seen data on private schools as well, and it's not hugely different in private schools. What is true is that primary school teachers, for example, are paid much less than teachers in government schools, 1/3 or 1/4. So in that sense, you could say that value for money is greater, but in terms of outcomes, there's not a huge difference between the two. So one more thing is if for example, I showed you enrollment data, this would be very, very high in India, and it would be much more uniform across India. Whereas learning outcomes are much different, and there's more variation across the states there. Now, okay, so now I've been through a bunch of data on India, but now I want to take you into. So here's a kind of a rule of thumb, and I'm going to get into trouble. When you present data, for policymakers and people who have very little time, always present data on one dimension, just what is happening. One dimensional data. Poverty is coming up, poverty is coming down. This has a lot and this little, etc., etc. But when it comes to the students, I think you should go into two dimensions. And I want to give you a sense of how I look at data when I kind of do my research and add this. I always like to do things in two dimensions. So just to give you, I'm going to give you a few examples. So this is Human Development Index on the vertical axis and per capita income on the horizontal axis. Now, we know that they should be highly correlated for two reasons. They should be highly correlated because the Human Development Index, part of it is per capita GDP. But the interesting thing for me is that, it's not as highly correlated as it should be. Income and human development, and so what I look for in data that I look at, you see this pattern, right? And then you say, yes, very good. But then you have to look at both the patterns and the outliers to the pattern. So notice here that Jammu and Kashmir and Kerala stick out in this chart. And Tamil Nadu doesn't stick out as much. Remember, when we looked at, take this chart for example. You see Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, you see these are doing, have very good human development index, right? But when you go to this data, this chart, you actually get a slightly different impression than just looking at the singular data on human development index. What this tells you is that, essentially what this says is that, yes, more income is associated with more human development, better human development outcomes, but it's not one-to-one, and there can be reasons why one departs from the other. So Kerala, for example, and Jammu and Kashmir, they stick out because they are far away from this line of fit. So when you plot two variables, you should plot the line of best fit. So that tells you what is the average relationship between the two variables. And points close to the line, basically they say, yeah, they are close to the relationship. But points well above say, so for example, Jammu and Kashmir says, for its level of income, Jammu and Kashmir should have been here on the Human Development Index, but actually it's much here. For its level of income, Kerala should have been here, but actually it's much higher. So Kerala and Jammu and Kashmir are in some sense big outliers in this relationship. And then when you go and actually look at the history of Kerala and Jammu and Kashmir, you will see, yes, there is a reason for this. For example, in Kerala, we've had, there's been a lot written on the fact that it had a matriarchal system. and the emphasis on education that happened, and also because educational reforms started much earlier with the Communist Party and EMS Nambudiri Part and so on. And so you see straight away there are good historical and state-specific reasons for why Kerala sticks out there. Like similarly, Jammu and Kashmir, one of the unknown, people don't know well enough, is Sheikh Mujib carried out early land reforms and educational reforms in Jammu and Kashmir. Yeah, sorry, I meant Sheikh Abdullah. Sorry, of course. You're more alert than I am. I need my espresso coffee, I think, very quickly. But this is so. A graph like this is actually highly interesting as a teaching device.
Why is Gujarat an outlier here?
But see, now notice that KA is Karnataka and GJ is Gujarat, but they are outliers on the other side. So for their level of income, yeah, exactly, they should have higher. And so then when you teach this in the classroom, you could then say, okay, go out and tell me, write a 3-page paper on, or 2-page paper on, or these days, I don't know what kind of assignments you set. Maybe you say, give me 7 bullet points instead of 2 pages, because, or write a tweet, write a tweet to summarize why, Gujarat is like this or Kerala is like this. I don't know how you do this, but this is a nice way of actually seeing the pattern and seeing the exception, and then seeing why there is a pattern and why there are exceptions. So these is, for me, I've made a living based on this kind of chart, basically. The dirty secret I want to let you know. This is the secret of my... so if all of you want to become chief economic advisor, I think this is the kind of chart you should look at and look at and look at, and then... but it's true that for me, looking at data like this is actually very important. Now, similarly, look at poverty and per capita GDP. Same thing that you see, of course, there's a very strong relationship. It's absolutely true that the poorer states, the per capita states with higher per capita GDP have lower poverty, and vice versa on average. And that relationship is an average relationship. It's a strongly negative sloping relationship. But then you see straight away the exceptions to this. Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, for their level of per capita GDP, they have much more poverty than they should have. Similarly, Kerala and Tamil Nadu and Punjab have, given their level of income, have lower levels of poverty than they should have. Now, a little bit later, we'll get into, we're going to see why this might be the case for Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Can anyone give an explanation?
Industrialization and people taking away their money outside.
Mineral-rich states, so as the resource consumption. And second is GDP, not GNP kind of thing.
Okay, so two very good points have been made. One is about the resource curse, and we'll just come to that. We're going to do that. The other thing, which I think is a very important point that's been raised, is the following. And this is something that's bothered me about research on India for a very long time. It's just that I don't know how to do this systematically and properly. Now, in a country like India, and we're going to show you, if there's a lot of migration and a lot of remittance flows across states, GSDP may not be the best indicator, and the point that you just made, it's a very good point. GSDP may not be the best indicator of standards of living. And we've done all this, and I'll show you data. You can do all this in terms of consumption, which will capture the remittance effect. But better. Yeah. Consumption is better than income, not quite. But it's true that in India you should be looking, for this reason, lots of migration, lots of remittance flows. You should look at not just GSDP, however that's measured. You should also look at other indicators like consumption. And I really haven't seen any measure of the equivalent of gross national income in India that you find in international comparison. So that's something. So one project would be that get data on remittance inflows into a state and see whether one can do better than just have GSDP. I think would be a very interesting exercise. So you see here that this is a relationship. It's not therefore this sort of just these two charts kind of then suggests that the question that you raised, sir, earlier, that one should be looking at development in a more multidimensional sense for two reasons. One is, one believes that, income doesn't capture everything. But supposing income and all these other things were highly correlated, then you wouldn't need to measure these other things. But here we find that they're actually not correlated so much, or not fully or perfectly correlated, which means that these other dimensions do capture something over and above what this is. And that's why, getting into multidimensional measures of development would be kind of quite interesting.
In Gujarat, don't you think that trading community is having the major reason? Because that marginal propensity to spend on education and health is a big thing. That community mindset. In the previous slide. Each one is going to have his own pet theory about why some state is doing well or not. But I think that I would say things like being open to trade probably affect more things like income, maybe not educational practices or health practices, but that's something. But here's a let me convert our mistake into a learning opportunity. So the question I'm going to ask to all of you, which you will have to answer, is: had Uttar Pradesh been on this chart, where would it be? So would it be here or here? Okay, see, now here's the thing, right? I can tell you where this is going to be exactly on the x-axis. All I have to do is go to the previous chart, and I know on the x-axis per capita income, UP is here, so it's about, let's say this is about 42. So 42, 0 to 50, 42 would be somewhere here, right? But the question is, we don't know whether it's going to be here, or here. Below, I can guarantee you it'll be above the line. Above the line. This is, my friends, we have to do this today and come back and tomorrow to show this graph again. This is the thumb rule. UP will be with Bihar.
No. Okay. No. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay, you've cracked a very good joke, but what does it mean to say UP is going to be with Bihar? It's an important question. No. In this chart, tell me, what does that mean? What does that mean?
Means comparable levels of power.
See, no, sorry, it was a very important question. We know that on the x-axis, we know there is this gap, okay? So the question is, when you say it's with Bihar, see, Bihar is not an outlier. For its level of income, it's close to the line. The question is therefore whether UP is also close to the line or is far away from the line. So if you mean it's like Bihar, that means it should be close to the line. Yeah. But I'm not so sure. Okay. Now here's a very important point. Here's an important point. Again, remember, this is in terms of analysis and things. Very important point to remember. This will come out later when we do some of the other indicators. But very important to remember that Uttar Pradesh and Haryana are a bit misleading, because Noida is part of Uttar Pradesh and Gurgaon is part of Haryana. So when we think about, is it therefore really the Delhi capital region, or is it because of Uttar Pradesh,
is kind of an open, interesting question. Same thing for Gurgaon. Is Gurgaon where it is richer because it's Haryana government state policies, or is it because of being close to Delhi that it does so well? So again, these are very, very interesting questions when you can look at, when you do this kind of analysis. But my wager is, so we'll prove it to you tomorrow. Who is with me? I think that, okay, Kapil, you have a question.
It's on the line. Just to answer this thing, to answer.
Yeah, please.
It will be on the line.
It's on the line, okay.
UP is with Bihar.
So you've done it already? Okay, good, okay. Okay. So we have, Kapil has given us the answer already. So Bihar is 29, so it's bang on the line, almost bang on the line. UP is bang on the line. That's kind of surprises me a little bit, but that's the data. Okay, yeah, you've never asked a question, so please do. Yeah, into the mic.
Two very good questions. First, that adding 14 more states to this graph will change the relationship itself a little bit.
One very good point. I'll come to that in a second. Yes. Second.
About Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, just the fact that they have a large tribal population along with nationalism, could that also be another?
Okay. So this is exactly the discussion I wanted to have on this. I was fearing that this would become a very boring, this happens in this state, but this is exactly what I mean as a pedagogical device. Two both excellent observations and questions. Now, sorry? Yeah, but true. So let me just say that whenever you do this analysis, and let me assure you that when we do this in so many different ways. You include all the states and take away some of them, because you don't know what is the right way to do it. I mean, should for example Goa be in this or not? Because remember, in this, one state is one data point, and so Goa has the same weight as Uttar Pradesh. So, and there's no correct answer to this. So that's why, in order to do this kind of analysis, you should do it with the big states, do it with all the states, do it taking out some states, maybe have a population cutoff and say, below this you shouldn't have, because there's no good answer. Because
Weighted relation.
yeah, you could do a population weighted relationship, and I'm going to show you something like that in just a second. But these are exact. And the second thing, of course, is that Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, it's kind of related to the natural resource curse point, because we'll take you through some data here about what happens, what is common to states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, that they do have more insurrectionary activity, therefore weaker institutions. Now, why that's the case also, we can explore a little bit with the data. But I feel that just this discussion is now making me very happy that you don't need coffee, and certainly I do need the coffee, but I'm not getting the coffee, so I don't know what's happening. But anyway, you kept me awake. One question?
Orissa is also missing. Belongs to the actually that should be done as well.
Orissa is missing, yes.
Orissa is not there, Madhya Pradesh is not there.
It's here, it's in this chart.
I don't know. So we'll redo. Kapil, can you just meanwhile just put in all the states and do it? And this is I don't know why this has happened like this. We'll put in Orissa, and we'll put in all the big states, certainly. Certainly in the version that you'll see in the economic survey has all the big states. I don't know why this got left out, but we'll certainly do this, yeah? Yeah, but it's true, but the point that you made is a very important point. So tomorrow, actually, I'm going to come back to this chart, and this is what I'm going to show everyone. In response to the very good question that was raised, is that I'm going to show you this chart and the chart with all the states. Notice, I think the deeper point that the lady made is the following, that what is the pattern? We can see whether the new slope line will be the same or not, and then which are the outliers might also change as a result of that. So you see, so that's going to be so let's convert our mistake into a learning opportunity, and let's do that right away. We'll show you juxtapose and exactly the question that does it change the relationship, does it change who's above? It's something that we can show to you, but that would be a really good exercise as well. So someone had question. Okay, now my friend, now we're getting into, okay, there's another level of complication. Okay, now when you do this analysis going back before some of these states were split, then, so supposing you do the analysis going back to 1980, then you have to work with combined states. True, but after, supposing you're only going to do it afterwards, then it's true that you should only work. My suspicion is that here UP is divided. UP does not have Uttarakhand, correct? It's separately there, yeah, okay. Now, exactly, so in this, and therefore, we have Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, so we have Jharkhand and Bihar separately. So this is post-divided states, but when you do this going back in time, you have to have it as one state. Okay, so now, remember I said one dimension for the politicians, 2 dimension for the students, and for the sophisticated students and the researchers, 3 dimensions. Here we show, the object is not necessarily to show you what is being shown here, but notice now that the states are now shown in terms of bubbles. The size here, just as a learning thing, the bubble is proportional to the number of poor in a state. So for example, you have infant mortality against total fertility. So this tells you, for example, okay, the R square is 0.47. That means that this is not a very strong relationship. It is not the case that fertility and mortality are very strongly related. That's one thing you take away from this. And the other thing you take away from this, of course, is that, you see, is this relationship, for example, more true for the states with more poor or less poor? And so you can answer these questions. One thing I really would urge you with your students is that throw them simple data like this and get them to get their hands dirty in the data and explore the data, because that's, I think, economics now more and more is about understanding and using data. But quite apart from that, it's just, for me, the data makes these things come alive, and then you can go off and explore all the interesting things about this. By the way, this one has Orissa, this one has UP, only the previous one we'll fix, but this is, okay. Now, when I said earlier that you could talk about one India, you could talk about 2 India, we could talk about Bharat and India, that's one agriculture rural, and then you could talk about peninsular India and hinterland India, and then you can also then go further and say that within these states there are actually very, very different models of development. Now, you think of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu as being the states where manufacturing has done the best. You think of Kerala as a state where it has 2 dimensions. One is, of course, the whole human development index that we've seen, but it's also a remittance-reliant state, international remittances. So its pattern of development is very, very different. Skilled services, this is part of what I called yesterday the precocious Indian development model. I think that Karnataka, Tamil Nadu with the IT and all that are different states. Within the hinterland model, we're going to do, for example, we're going to do, we're going to look at this, the special status, whether, aid, natural resources are special states or not. And then there's a very interesting model, which is Himachal and Uttarakhand. I'm going to show you something. Okay, let me show you some charts to illustrate this. Manufacturing. Okay, sure, we show you a map, which are the most manufactured. So the darker the color, the more the manufacturing. The lighter the color, less manufacturing. And this is the relationship between manufacturing share in GDP and per capita GDP. So the question is, and you see on the chart straight away, look where Uttarakhand is. And look there, Uttarakhand and Himachal, look where they are. They are kind of manufacturing-based models of development. And does anyone know the answer to why that could be the case?
Tax concessions.
Just tax concessions, big part of this. So a good example of... Yeah, exactly. Tax concessions, relaxation, basically a lot of excise and income tax exemptions. You see that lots of firms relocate to that, have relocated. Exactly. Yeah. Huh? See, northeastern states, we don't have data for some of them, but we do have for Assam. And Meghalaya. Meghalaya is quite manufacturing oriented. What is that about? Even I didn't know that. Huh? But my friend, this is manufacturing. Oh, not again, policy-induced manufacturing. So again, remember that when you look at this, you see. Remember also on the right-hand side when you see the chart. Now this is a chart which has many more states, and you see that the relationship is much weaker. Lots more outliers. For example, Uttarakhand, Delhi. Look at Delhi. Delhi is now. This is a good example where Delhi qua Delhi is very misleading, because if you were to add Gurgaon to Delhi, this would change completely. So this is something that all of you should, So this is a way of looking at data and, asking questions that you should be looking at. Yeah?
Meghalaya is missing here in this, I guess. It's on the graph, but
On the other thing it's missing, yeah. See, I think we took away, we wanted to not have, because the more outliers you have on this chart, the more the relationship will be skewed by the outliers. So you have to take a decision on, okay? So then we go to the natural resource model. This comes to the question about Chhattisgarh and things. You find, for example, that basically, now here's a small aside. In the latest economic survey, we have a whole section on whether natural resources are good or bad for development, measured in terms of levels of income and growth rates of per capita GSDP. What we find is that, because remember that the reason why I like to think of these things in analytical terms like natural resource curves, manufacturing, etc., is because I've looked a lot at the international cross-country literature. In the cross-country literature, for example, countries that have more oil have tended to do worse than countries that have less oil. It's a paper that, many Sachs and Warner have a paper. It's in the part of the reading list. But, I've also written some papers on this. And so the question is that, in some ways, basically, India is not one unit of analysis. India is like, you can do almost like cross-country analysis within India, because there's so many different aspects to this. And the other thing to say about the natural resource model is that, here we have measured natural resources based on mining. We have not been able to, for example, add forests to this, because yeah.
Power generation through hydropower.
That doesn't come. That's we haven't done. No, hydro we haven't done. Yeah, yeah. No, that's not. But the thing about forests is that when you have forests, these are forested areas that lead to, for example, corruption with the timber industry. But also forests are more conducive to Naxalite type activities. So then when you ask the question, is it because of insurgency that's bad? At one level, it's insurgency, but at another level, you could say, well, in turn, the insurgency, is it because of something else? And then you go try and, peel more and more levels of analysis, and then you see. So this is another.
In case of natural resources, I mean, the coal linkages and all those things have abolished all incentives for power sector to develop in these coal-abundant states. And hence power sector is also in Tamil Nadu, because coal would be given at same cost in both the states. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So the question is, and yeah, the question, yeah. So the good question, and we actually, you're in some ways anticipating what we're going to do in the railways. See, for a long time we had something called a freight equalization policy in India, which tried to disperse manufacturing activity because naturally, if there's coal and natural resources, manufacturing act like steel plants naturally tend to get located near coal. But because we had this policy, we would give subsidies. If you're further away from the resource, you would get a subsidy in order to encourage manufacturing away, to kind of disperse manufacturing. And until recently, Punjab had a steel mill. Punjab had no business having a steel mill. It was not only not close to natural resources, it was also not close to markets. It was not close to anywhere else. So Punjab had no business to be there. So in fact, going back, therefore, when we discussed Indian economic history, I mean, as it is, it was getting overloaded. But you could argue that another objective of Indian economic policy at that point was, in fact, to achieve regional spread of economic activity, and freight equalization and some of these other things were kind of related to that. Freight equalization was removed, when was it? About post-liberalization, about 92, I think it was taken away.
Coal linkage is still there.
And then, of course, the incentive, now kind of little bit more location is determined by non-policy factors and much more related to natural comparative advantage and things like that. You look at Bihar. Now, this is international remittances, not internal remittances, and you see clearly that. Okay, a question for you: which is the most highly represented Indian community in the United States, and probably the richest Indian community in the United States?
Sikh. Punjabi Sikh.
Andhra Pradesh. It is not. In fact, the diaspora in the United States of Sikh origin is actually amongst the poorest, amongst other Indian. This book by Professor Devesh Kapoor, you see all these things. I think the richest community is actually the Andhra Pradesh, and so that's why remittances are quite high. A lot of the doctors in the United States are from, of course, you have software engineers from Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and so on, and from the Delhi area. But I think the Andhra community is very. I hope I have some friends here from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. No, my friends, this is regional. Huh? They're all in the US, exactly. They're all in. Very good point. Very good point. They're all in the United. Now let's see some more. We're going to see a little bit more some of the analytical work that we do with this. So in one of the papers that was distributed, and this is a variation. I hope all the states are here. Now here you'll see asterisk means these will be combined states because the unit of analysis goes back to 84. And so when I want to look at data, for example, I make use of two lines. One line I showed you before, you plot two things and have the line of best fit, which shows the average relationship, and then see what fits the pattern, what doesn't fit the pattern. Here what I do is, guess what this line is? Exactly, it's the 45-degree line. And I do that for a reason. So here on the x-axis, 84 to 2004, i.e. pre-boom, what happened? And on the y-axis, the growth rate, annual average growth rate after 2004, what happened? So this is kind of the boom period. And then essentially what I want to show you in this, here's what I want to show you. It's clear that, all the states have grown faster after 2004 than before. So all of them have done better. But the question is, which states have done disproportionately better compared to that? And for that you have to see the vertical distance from this line. Because if you're on this line, you grew at the same rate before and after, but you see, and this is where you see Bihar is a real outlier. In the period after 2002, we know this happened. Bihar Bihar not only, so this gives you the absolute level of growth, but this distance tells you how much better than the previous thing that you grew. And then you can again, look at very, very interesting things. The state that, even UP, for example, this line is quite big. And notice here that the state that actually doesn't do that well compared to before is the state that's closest to the line is actually West Bengal. So West Bengal, in fact, did not.
That gap is more here, so it's 45.
So it's that gap. It's how much better you did in the subsequent period as you did before. That's what that gap measures. And here you see the big stride was actually made by Bihar. Yeah.
The scale should be same so that it looks like, otherwise it's a bit deceptive.
Sorry. One conversation at a time. Just one conversation. The first question is that, there's a base effect. I mean, there's not really too much of a base effect in this. These are all, you're not starting at, growth rates are dependent upon, obviously, on an initial starting point to some extent, but this is a really meaningful change in this. The second question is that, is it distorted by scale? I don't think there's any scale distortion here.
On the x and y axis, the distance between 0 and 1 on both axes is different.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That makes it slightly deceptive.
That's true. That's a fair point. Yeah. So promise number 2, we're going to show this chart tomorrow with the same distance on this as this. The units have to be the same on both axes.
Only then it would be.
It's still a 45-degree line, but no. So essentially, what we're saying is that, okay. Sorry. Let me take back that point. I think that there would be a little bit of a kind of perspective difference if you had to compare this with this, because here this is this and here this is this. But if you're just looking at these numbers here, I think they are comparable and you don't have to. Okay, so essentially one takeaway from this is that obviously the growth boom in India around 2003 affected all the states, but it affected some states that previously were not doing well, like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, little bit caught up with the other states in this period. Okay, now I want to come back to my old friend here. These are charts these are in fact, I would say, the more striking analytical chart about India. And remember when I showed you convergence and divergence? Convergence, when you see a convergence, on the x-axis, initial level of per capita state domestic product. On the y-axis, the growth rate in subsequent periods. We said that if there is convergence, this line should be strongly downward sloping, negatively sloped. And what you find is that consistently, no matter how you do this in India, you have upward sloping. Someone asked about convergence and divergence in the first. So this is the first case of, or the first chart within India we're showing where you see massive divergence between the states. So that, states that are initially poor actually don't grow, they actually on average seem to grow slower than states that were rich, so that even the initial gap gets magnified over time because the poorer states are growing slower, the richer states are going faster, and then this is, and again in this there are outliers, but the fundamental striking fact about growth in states within India is that there is massive divergence and not convergence.